I don't want to live like an average life. And so one of my sayings is, if the average person would do this, then I'm probably not going to, because then you're probably going to get an average person's results, right? Now, that's not anything against marketing IT. Like, I know I would have learned so much there. That entire team, they've won awards for how amazing they are. But I wanted to go where it was going to be harder, where it was a brand new team. I didn't know anybody. I actually wasn't even really going to have a senior developer to help me get started.
Welcome to the Exponential Growth Podcast, where we demystify what it takes to break into tech. I'm your host, James Hudnall, and my goal is to highlight real-life examples of people with non-traditional backgrounds moving into careers they love, so you can too. Hey everyone, today I'm joined by Mckenzie Noel, a full-stack software developer who landed her first dev role just a few months ago. Mckenzie, welcome to Exponential Growth. Why don't you briefly introduce yourself?
Hey, yeah, thanks for having me on. So I began my journey into software just a little over a year ago, actually, in May of 2022. I accepted a role in a tech adjacent position. I was an e-business specialist with Winsupply, and I was working really closely with developers, which kind of sparked my interest in that role. And then before I knew it, I was hired as a developer in May of 2023. So this has all been very new for me. Prior to getting into tech, I taught horseback riding lessons, and I also trained horses for several years. So quite
That's
the
incredible.
career
That does
change.
not,
Yeah.
horseback riding lessons does not seem tech adjacent. Why don't you take us back to that, and maybe even early childhood if you like. Were you ever the go-to tech person growing up?
When I was a pretty young kid, yeah, I was. I was always the person who would fix the computer stuff for mom and dad, right? I never had any formal training in it or anything. We had a computer and I loved to play on it. I played video games. I was the kid who would make Excel spreadsheets just for fun. Like,
I
I
can
was
relate.
always horse obsessed. Yeah, awesome. And like, I would have all these charts for like the silliest stuff, like all the different colors of horses I've ridden or the different breeds. And I could tell you like 25% of the horses I've ridden are quarter horses, just super nerdy stuff like
Nice.
that. So
And the
as a kid,
statistics.
yeah, as a kid, I did all that kind of stuff. And then as like a teenager, young adult, I started getting into working with horses full time, which didn't use much tech really in the day-to-day job, but I also was kind of the business manager, the managing partner, and so I had to do all of the bookkeeping, and I did all of that on my laptop, and I tried to figure out, different ways to improve things. Looking back now, I see how the things I did and the mindset I had very much led into being a developer. But at the time, I had, no idea how much I actually loved the tech.
Yeah. I can hear there's a lot of transferable skills, even if maybe you didn't appreciate it while you were going through it. And I wanted to pull the thread on the horseback riding business that you mentioned, because I saw on your LinkedIn profile that you conveyed it as such, and I can hear that you did implement those systems you talked about. I've got so many questions, but I guess I would start with, how did you figure things out? I mean, you didn't have this business degree. You treated it as a business. I assume you just kind of figured things out as it went. How did that go?
Yeah, pretty much. My father-in-law, he ran a horse business, so I had a really great resource. I could ask him questions, but he didn't have any formal training either. So
Okay.
it was very much figure it out as you go, do what your clients want kind of thing. As you can see, I have my bookshelf back here. I love to read. So I did my own research about just business in general, and I implemented my own things, and I found things that worked and found things that didn't. It was all trial and error for sure.
Okay. Cool. And you did that for, I think I saw, almost 6 years. So if you wanted to, I don't know, maybe you want to summarize your learnings as you see that they relate to what you do today over that time. And also, I guess towards the end of that, how did that chapter of your life wrap up and on to the next passion that you developed?
Yeah. So my time with horses, like I said, ever since I was a kid, I have been obsessed with them. So as far as I was concerned, I had the dream job. Wake up, go to the barn, teach kids how to ride myself. It was wonderful. And I developed, myself as a trainer and as an instructor. I tried to distinguish myself from everyone else in the area that did it, because this is like I live in Southwest Ohio. It's a pretty big horse area. A
Okay.
lot of people doing it. And so I had to find a way to be different. And my way of being different was to focus on excellence. You'd see a lot of people doing things and they were just kind of doing it. If that makes any
Yeah.
sense. They were just kind of going through the motions and, oh yeah, here you're riding a horse, here's how you sit, blah, blah, blah. But I really tried to focus on why we do things the way we do. How can we take it to the next level? In anything in life, I believe that we're called to excellence. And so I really tried to have that be a driving factor with
Yeah.
my business. Even for kids, I tried to make it fun for them. That was the most important part. But I really tried to instill those habits. You do things right, you do them right the first time because this is a big animal. If you don't do things right, you're going to get hurt.
Yeah.
Also, we have to have absolute, utmost respect for the horses because of everything that they're doing for us. And so I think that mindset of paying attention to detail and striving for excellence were kind of natural strengths that led into being a software developer. But how it actually wrapped up, I
Can I
wasn't,
wait? Can I ask
yeah.
a follow up question before we go there? That was my fault for asking a two-part question initially. So I want to ask this focus on excellence. Is this something that you just stumbled upon? Is it something that you developed earlier on in life? Like, where did that come from?
That's a great question, and I probably need to do some more self-reflecting on that. I don't know where it came from. I feel
Just
like it's
have
just
it.
always been a part of me, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's good to differentiate your product on excellence and quality as opposed to necessarily price, because I feel like that's an impossible battle to win. And I can imagine how that translates into pretty much any field, definitely software development. So back to the part two of the original question, I guess, wrapping up this chapter of your life.
Yeah. So before it wrapped up, I was actually going to expand. The business was doing great. I had more people, more clients that I knew what to do with, and my current location was too small. I needed a bigger barn, I needed more horses, I needed more. And so, I was talking with investors and coming up with plans, and I was getting ready to pull the trigger on buying property, leasing property, doing something when one of my clients actually approached me. I taught his daughter lessons. She was one of my first students. I've known her for years. And he was like, I know you're kind of at a segue with your business. Would you be interested in trying something else or doing something different? And I was like, well, I don't like to turn down opportunity, tell me more about it. And as it turns out, he is the director of e-business at Winsupply, and he was hiring for an e-business specialist. And he's like, I think you have all the right qualities that we're looking for. And me loving business and not having any experience other than what I've done on my own, I was like, heck yeah, this is a great way to learn about business. This kind of stuff doesn't happen every day. I'm going to do it. If I don't like it, I can jump right back into the horse thing.
Yeah.
And the rest is history. So,
Yeah, no, I love that. And I love the attitude you had going through that. It reminds me when I reflect back on my own pivots that I've done, like going from the boats to the management of the boats, and then the fateful decision to leave that behind and fully embrace trying to become a software engineer. Same thing. Like, I don't think I was quite that resolute. It took me a little bit more to convince myself of it, but at the same time, I knew that I could go back. And I just wanted to highlight that point because I hear that in so many of the conversations that I have, Mckenzie, is this willingness to take on a little bit of a risk. I think it's a calculated risk because, to your point, you can always go back to what you knew before, but why not take this opportunity, which, again, to your point, they don't always present themselves. So I think it's so cool that you seized on that. And yeah, I guess, I think I know the answer to this. Was it hard leaving behind the horse aspect of your life? Do you still do that recreationally at all, maybe on weekends?
yeah, it was so, so hard. The hardest part was actually telling the students because
Mm.
I had such a great relationship with these kids. And like my heart still hurts when I think about it sometime, like having to tell these kids, hey, we can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a dark period in a way. But I do still have three of my horses and I do still ride several times a week. So I'm able to maintain that passion and that hobby, but it was very hard leaving it for
Yeah.
sure.
No, I can imagine.
Leaving
And
it
to
full time.
those out there listening, I've never owned a horse. My younger sister did growing up, and just one of those was a full-time job in and of itself. So it sounds like you're working two full-time jobs now if you have three horses. So I just wanted to point that out as well. So now at Winsupply, I guess talk about starting there. It sounds like you've got this great attitude. You're ready to learn new things. What was that like the first day, week, month? What was that onboarding like?
Yeah, I was soaking it all up. I was so excited to be in a new, I'd never been in the corporate world before, so I was totally up for the challenge. And I knew my boss, I'd known him for years. So that made it really easy having such a great relationship with my team already. And the girls I worked with were super welcoming, highly intelligent. I remember the first day I was like, man, I'm so excited to learn from these girls. So onboarding was smooth as could be. And as an e-business specialist, I guess I'll tell you a little bit what I was doing
Please.
there.
Yeah,
And actually, I'll start with what Winsupply is in case you haven't heard of it.
that'd be great.
Winsupply is one of the nation's leading wholesalers for things such as HVAC, plumbing, waterworks, industrial, all that good stuff. And there are hundreds of, we call them local companies throughout the country. And I worked at, we don't usually use the word corporate headquarters, we like to call it support service campuses. So that's where I was at, but you can think of it kind of like corporate headquarters.
Okay.
And then as an e-business specialist, I was on the e-commerce team. So I was helping train all of our local companies, how to sell their products on the website. I was helping resolve customer issues if they had trouble with the website, things like that.
Okay.
So
I'm trying to put myself in your position going into that, and I definitely did experience imposter syndrome, especially when I had moved into like the management side of the boats. So I'm curious, did you feel that at all as you were going through this time?
yeah, like every day.
Yeah. How'd you deal with that?
So I chalk it up to my team. They were so supportive. I cannot talk highly enough about them. They were always reassuring me like, hey, you're doing a great job. You're picking up with this really quickly. And they're like, here's some more resources if you feel like you want to know more. And the other part is acting on that. They can
Yeah.
give you resources all day long, but if you don't take the time to learn them, they don't do you any
Yeah.
good. So
Cool.
I just tried to educate myself as much as I could.
Yeah, no, that's great. And as you're learning these new skills, are you thinking in the back of your mind, okay, now I see I was doing X, Y, and Z wrong at my horseback riding lesson business. I should have applied this, or maybe in the future I'll do X, Y, and Z. Were there any takeaways, things that maybe you would do differently that come to mind?
Yeah, I have thought about this. One of the biggest things is not being afraid to kind of tell people this is the business plan and this is what it needs to be. When I was teaching horseback riding lessons, it would be really easy for me to cater to everyone, which, to an extent you do. They're your customers and you care about them. But you have to make sure everyone's like playing by the same rules. And I believed that, but sometimes it would be kind of hard for me to like set the ground rules. And because I was afraid of hurting their feelings or losing a customer. But now I'm seeing it's like, set your business model, and
Yeah.
that's that. And the customers usually accept it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes
That was
sense.
something I learned.
Yeah. And so going back in time just a little bit, we didn't talk about, did you have any college experience, anything like that? Or you were just thrust into this, you had your own business and now you're in the corporate world, even if we're not calling it the corporate headquarters, and you're just figuring things out as you go?
Yep, figuring things out as I go. I graduated high school, went right into teaching full time, and then right to Winsupply.
I love it. Did you ever think about going to college for any reason, or was there never a reason to in your mind?
No, I really didn't. I had a pretty good, actually, I kind of started teaching lessons in high school,
Okay.
and that was going really well. And I was like, honestly, I'm gonna just keep going with it.
Yeah, I wish I had been that open when I was going through the last few years of high school and into college, because I don't know if you know my story or not, but long story short, I had no intentionality behind my choice to go to college. And again, long story short, it took me 8 years to get a 4-year English degree, which I'm glad I have it. It's checking a box, I guess, but honestly, there's so much more I could have done in that time. So I think it's so cool that you were willing to think differently, or maybe you didn't think about it that way. I just think it's cool to hear someone that didn't, try to check all the boxes that maybe society was otherwise pressuring a lot of people to do. And you not only ran your own business, now you're getting to experience the quote unquote, a real live business that you're thrust into the middle of, figuring out that you can apply back to your own business probably in the future. So again, I just think that's so cool. Now, where did programming come into the mix?
So that came into the mix when I was working really closely with the developers as an e-business specialist. I would get complaints from customers and figure out what was wrong, and then it was my job to go to the developers and be like, hey, this is broken. Can you fix it? And so I developed really good relationships with the marketing IT team, and I loved their problem solving. I was like, okay, well, how did you figure out that this is why it was broken? And I found myself constantly trying to learn more about their job, and I was like, oh my gosh, I want to be a developer.
That was
So
it.
it just kind of
Yeah. Did you know anybody that
came
had
closer.
become a developer like growing up?
Not really. I guess my grandma actually, I didn't know it until a few weeks ago. She was a programmer. She doesn't unfortunately remember much of what she did,
Hmm.
but she's like the only one I know in my family that did it.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I too. I had no one to pattern match, but eventually, we found our way into the industry. That's what matters at the end of the day. So you just
Yeah.
discovered programming, and like I guess you had your light bulb moment. Did you think that you actually wanted to do that as a full-time role, or it was just something you found interesting?
I knew.
And so, what did you do next to make that a reality?
So to make that a reality, I talked to my director and the director of the marketing IT team where the developed. Actually, one step back, there was one thing I did before that. I talked to the senior developer that I communicated with a lot, and I was like, hey, pretty interested in this. What are some resources that I can look into for starting to learn wherever? I knew absolutely nothing. I didn't even know how to ask the question. I was like, how do I learn to code?
Yeah.
So he then actually also got in contact with the marketing IT director, and they signed me up for one of the, I don't know if I'm saying this right, Udemy.
That's how I say
I
it.
don't know
I've
how
heard
it's,
it many different
okay,
ways, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
cool, we'll go with that. So I signed up for like a Java master class on Udemy, and they were like, try this out. If you still like it, then, we can talk more about how to get you educated in this. So I started it, and I'm not gonna lie, it was so hard. I'm like, I'm not cut out for this, but I was too invested.
Hmm.
I was like, this is what I want to do. I'm going to figure it out. Everyone at work was already planning on me moving into a developer role. They were so excited for it. And so I'm like, I'm going to have to figure this out. I don't have a choice.
Yeah, I just
There's
want to
no
highlight
way I
it's
can't do
Java.
it.
It's not like Python or JavaScript. Like you were thrown into Java, which I am still. That's what I use at work, and I still don't think that I'm very good at Java. And as a first programming language, I can't imagine that. So that probably didn't help.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, it was hard, for sure. Yeah, I guess Python is easier. I think JavaScript is harder,
really.
but that's just me.
You had talked about maybe some initial struggles. You didn't think you could get through it, but you had a really good support network. It sounds like the company culture is phenomenal.
Oh my gosh, they're the best.
Yeah. And I also wanted to ask, because I know it took me it probably did take me a year, Mckenzie, to muster the courage at my last job to basically let my boss know. So backing up a little bit, there was no path that I saw to become a developer at that company. It's a very manual, labor intensive business. I don't think they have developers. So that wasn't an option. And it took me so long to muster the courage to let him know that I was doing something different. And I'm curious, was any part of you nervous that that might get shot down and maybe you lose your job or anything like that just because maybe it could be conveyed that you weren't happy with the job you were doing? Did thoughts like that ever go through your mind or?
Yeah, that's a great question. Just side note before I answer it, that would be really hard going and telling your boss completely like, hey, I don't see a position for me at this company at all. So kudos to you for doing that. That would have been
Yeah, that was
even
tough.
harder than what I had to do. There were those thoughts. I don't want my director, the one who hired me in the first place, to feel like, yeah, she's not happy here, she wants to leave, because it wasn't. I knew that there was a path in the company I was in because they were hiring,
Okay.
and I worked so closely with them already. It just kind of it came up so naturally. It's kind of even hard to pinpoint a moment when it was like, hey, I'm leaving and switching departments.
Yeah.
It kind of flowed.
Yeah.
And everyone was so happy for me. My director, uh, he was so supportive. He's like, if this is what you want to do, you want to grow, you do it. You
Hmm.
know, there, I think like to your point, the company culture is so great. I had some fear, but I don't think it was grounded.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to ask now before I forget, and I'm very happy at LinkedIn to those listening, but is Winsupply hiring? Because to your point, the company culture sounds phenomenal.
They are, oh my gosh, everyone should work at a place like Winsupply. Right now, I don't think they're hiring devs. I haven't checked the board recently.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I don't
Maybe in the
think we are
future.
right now. But yeah, maybe.
Minor
Oh
detail.
yeah.
Okay, we'll figure
Yep.
that out. All right, so back to this transition story. You do the Udemy course. Do you eventually finish it? I guess is my first question. And the reason I asked that is I don't know that I've ever finished a Udemy course. I've gotten a lot of value from many of them. Maybe 80% is the most that I've done, but I don't think I've actually finished. But how did that work out for you?
Yeah, same. I've never finished a
Okay.
Udemy course. That bugs me deep in my
Yeah.
soul. But I didn't finish it because I made it, I forget the percentage, but I made it a good way through. And I told my director, like, yep, this is what I want to do. But inside, I'm like, yeah, it's what I want to do, but I don't know that I can. I was putting on a brave face.
Yeah.
And he's like, all right. And so they actually got me hooked up with Tech Elevator, which is a coding boot camp, in case you haven't heard of it. And they were starting a part-time remote cohort in November of 2022. And I needed to get, if I was going to do it, I needed to get signed up then so I could start. So I did not finish the Udemy course. That
Okay.
way I could do Tech Elevator.
Yeah. Can we talk about Tech Elevator? I don't know that I've heard of it. I saw it on your LinkedIn. I would love to learn more about the program and your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's where I learned, 99% of what I know. I definitely learned stuff on Udemy and it really helped prepare me for Tech Elevator, but uh, I didn't know anything about coding boot camps before I got started. It was the director who did some research to help me find, the right
Wow.
one. So Tech Elevator has some campuses, mainly like in Ohio and Pennsylvania, but they also have a program as well for those all across the country. And then, as I said, I did the remote. That way I could work full time and still attend. So that worked out really well for me. It's a full stack web application boot camp. So you learn, they have like different programs, but the one I did Java, JavaScript, and then you also work with databases. So you learn SQL.
Okay.
And by the end of it, like you know how to be a full stack developer. You can do it all. I did, being the part-time program, it was about 8 months start to finish, and they were the hardest 8 months of my life,
Mm.
but I did it.
How many hours a week? Ballpark?
Oh yeah, so it was probably 30 to 40 hours a week,
Wow.
easy.
So you're
Yeah.
actually working 3 full-time jobs if you're still maintaining the 3 horses on the side. That's kind of crazy.
My husband started taking care
Okay.
of the horses
Okay.
during that. Yeah,
Okay.
my whole life was work, Tech Elevator, go to
Got it.
bed. Maybe some nights I didn't, and then
Yeah.
back to work.
Okay. No, it's so interesting. And so going back to Tech Elevator, was there a career component of that boot camp, even if maybe that part didn't apply to you?
Yes, the pathway program of Tech Elevator is one of their selling points. They have excellent training and support to help their grads land jobs. And it starts from the very beginning. Like they help you get your resume squared away. They have you do mock interviews, behavioral and technical. And they continue supporting you after you graduate to help you find a job.
Yeah. Are you still, what was it, cohort based? I can't remember if you said that or not.
Yes, it was. So
Okay.
I did November 2022 through
Okay.
July 2023.
Are you still in contact with any of the people from your cohort? You are.
I am. Yeah, we were just messaging yesterday. We were talking about our side projects, and
Nice.
we have like an alumni Slack channel where everyone can kind of stay connected.
Nice.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it's good.
I don't stay in contact enough with the Springboard people that I didn't graduate that either, but yeah, to your point, I need to get better at that. But how have their outcomes been? Some landed jobs, some are still looking.
So the ones I talked to, she actually wasn't really looking for a job in software. She already was a solutions architect, and she wanted to just know more about coding and have that option someday. So she's still in her same role. And then the other guy I talked to, he is.
Interesting. And so now you graduate, quote unquote, from Tech Elevator, and now do you go back to Winsupply and you just here you go. Now you flipping a switch. Now Mckenzie is a developer. Is that how that worked?
It was kind of gradual. So before, I actually switched over as a developer before I graduated because timelines at work changed and they needed a developer and they were like, all right, you're good, let's go.
Yeah.
So I started when I was still an e-business specialist. They pulled me on to one of the development projects kind of part-time. So I split my time between duties still as an e-business specialist. And that was Project Wingspan, which is where we were doing performance testing across different databases to select the platform that we wanted to use. So that was really cool working on that. I still wasn't even out of school. And then I just slowly got pulled onto more and more development projects full time until it was like, okay, this is like what she's doing. Let's switch her over.
And so how long have you been in the role now?
So I started in May of 2023. So just a
Were there any, probably not insurmountable, that's the wrong word. Are there any challenges maybe during the onboarding or to this day? Do you ever find yourself totally stuck, or have you learned how to get unstuck, I guess?
I've learned how to get unstuck. It was difficult, and I'll give you a little bit of insight into
Please.
why it was so difficult. So when I was first deciding to become a developer, I was going to go on the marketing IT team. But then the director that, he was the one who supported me, got me through Tech Elevator, and, he's kind of like my mentor through it all. He got promoted and moved to a different part of the company. And then he was with data strategy and operations. And so then he was like, well, do you want to come work with me on data strategy, or do you want to stay with marketing IT like the original plan was? And it would have made so much more sense to stay with marketing IT because I knew all the developers there. I worked really closely with them. It would have been the most natural transition ever. But I don't want to live like an average life. And so one of my sayings is, if the average person would do this, then I'm probably not going to, because then you're probably going to get an average person's results, right? Now, that's not anything against marketing IT. Like, I know I would have learned so much there. That entire team, they've won awards for how amazing they are. But I wanted to go where it was going to be harder, where it was a brand new team. I didn't know anybody. I actually wasn't even really going to have a senior developer to help me get started. And plus, I was loyal to the director because he's the one who did all of this for me when a lot of people probably wouldn't have taken a chance. So with all that said, being on a new team, not knowing anybody, it was so hard. And I just figured it out. I'm like, this is what I want to do. I signed up for this. I'm going to do it. And
it sounds like you thrive in those situations. And I know that the past few accomplishments or achievements I've had in that regard, I feel like at the time you're struggling, but getting through that, I feel like empowers you and lets you know that you can get through things in the future. And it's not that you don't have future struggles, but I feel like we can always relate back to previous victories to help in those situations. I'm curious if you found the same.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. Looking back now, it hasn't even been that long, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I remember struggling so much with that first part of the project, and now I know it like the back of my hand. Now when I'm faced with hard things, it's like, well, I don't know this, but I don't know this yet. I've started adding yet to the end of all of my sentences because I've figured everything else out. I've got people to help me. There's no reason I can't keep succeeding. So it's easier now that I have that history, like you said, to look back on and draw from. When I first started, I was like, I've never felt imposter syndrome so badly before. I'm like, what am I doing?
When and where, if you think about it, where did you develop this sense for wanting to live, I guess, the life that you mentioned, like, and to have this impact? Because I find that so inspirational.
Oh, thank you. It's one of those things that I feel like has kind of always been a part of me because growing up, I had such wonderful parents. They were like, you can do anything you want to do. You can be anything you want to be. You just have to work hard enough to do it. And my dad kind of came from like absolutely nothing. Like they would shove newspapers in the holes in the wall to keep the snow from blowing in. And he left and he built his own business and he became successful. And so I was always just so inspired by my dad growing up. Like, you know what? I'm going to make something of myself. I'm going to pull myself up by my bootstraps and make something happen. So I don't want to live the average life because I saw my parents live a not average life. And
no, I think that is incredible. Where do you see yourself 5 or 10 years from now? And I acknowledge how hard that is to answer, because if you had asked me that 5 years ago when I was on boats, I would never have mentioned where I am today. But I'm curious, do you have a plan A?
So yeah, you are so right. 5 years ago, I'd been like, I was still on horses. Like I'll be on horses from 5 years
Right?
from now. Who would have thought? Uh, so the way I answer this question is I know, but I don't know. And the reason is I know what I want to do, but also that comes with a caveat because I'm so new to tech. I don't know what I don't know.
Absolutely.
There are so many things left to learn. I'm still exploring things. But if I had to make a decision today, in 5 to 10 years, I'd hope to be, a senior developer, maybe managing a team of developers because I miss teaching a lot when I was teaching the kids. And I feel like I could be good at that with software once I know more than I do now, of course, once I have some more experience. So I'd like to be in a position to help mentor. I want to find a way to make a difference in people's lives with software. I don't know what that looks like yet, but
Yet.
I'm hoping to have figured that yet. Yeah, I'm hoping to figure that out.
Yeah, I have no doubt that you will do just that. And I'm curious, do you have any designs on going the entrepreneur route again, and maybe integrating some of the things you're learning now in the future, perhaps either into the horseback riding business or something related, anything like that? Or
So I don't have like any plans or anything. I'm gonna stick with the software route a while. I feel like that's gonna be my best bet to grow myself and set myself up financially for the future. But my hope would be to one day open up kind of like my dream I had a few years ago, which is having a stable where you could have kids come out and ride their horses and they can hang out all day and they can learn all sorts of fun stuff. Like I just wanted to provide that for kids because so many don't get that. But now I'm kind of thinking it's going to be less of a business and be more of just something I'm able to do.
hmm,
That's my hope. I want to be able to provide a place for kids to come and get away from the world, have some fun with some ponies, and it would just be on a much smaller scale
yeah,
and something I would.
yeah, that makes sense. I want to briefly talk about mentorship. You mentioned with I think the director from the initial, maybe not job offer, but the question that they asked while you were still working at the stable all the way up until now. It seems like you found that mentorship maybe in more than just that person. And I'm curious, to those out there listening, do you have any advice or suggestions for people to try to find people like that?
Yeah, it's so important. So whatever you do, make sure you find someone. The way I did it, I just asked so many questions to anybody who I thought might have an answer, and then you could kind of feel who was interested in answering those questions. So just kind of cast your net wide and see what sticks. For me, I didn't have to cast it very wide. I found people pretty quickly, but you'll hear it all the time. Networking is such a great way to find mentors. I have found even some other people that don't work at Winsupply, but they are more in the security side of things at other companies that I found through networking. Just talking to people about, my job, my interests, listening to them and about their families, and they're like, "Oh, okay, you like writing code? Oh, my husband, he does stuff like that."
Hmm.
And then so you just kind of connect, and then just through little conversations like that, I found another mentor that I meet with, every few months, and he teaches me more about the security side of things because that kind of interests me.
Yeah.
So yeah, my advice is ask questions, just talk to people, ask about their lives, and tell them.
As a quick follow-up, because maybe the audience is thinking it, I know I used to think it and still fear it to an extent today. Were you ever afraid to ask some of those questions that you mentioned out of fear of seeming stupid, for lack of a better word, on the topic that you were discussing?
Yes, and I still feel that way
Okay.
sometimes. That's my biggest fear. I'm not afraid to ask questions, but until I know the person I'm asking the question to, I'm like, I really don't want to look stupid. But that's something that we just kind of have to deal with because you're gonna look stupid either way. You can either look stupid asking the question, or you can look stupid later on having tried to fix something or do something and you didn't do it right because you don't know the answer.
Yeah.
And then, does that make sense?
It does. It totally does. I had a senior engineer on my team. I was asking a similar question, and they had said the same thing. They said it's much better to ask questions now as opposed to when you're later on when you're in a senior role. You know, there's certain expectations that you know these things. So now is the time to ask as opposed to pretending that you know and just trying to get by. So, yeah, to your point, I totally agree that you need to, you know, it's a struggle, and I still struggle with it today. It sounds like maybe you do as well. It's not fun or comfortable to ask those questions, but I feel like working through that discomfort is how you unlock growth and better understanding in whatever field you're trying to go.
Can I ask you how you work through it?
Asking what seems to be silly questions to me?
Yeah.
Is that the
Yeah.
question?
Because I still
Yeah,
struggle with
that's
it.
great. Yeah, that's a great question. So our team I'm remote on my LinkedIn team, and our correspondence is primarily Slack based. And I don't know. I know it helped because when I was onboarding, my manager suggested to have Zoom based one-on-ones just like this. And even though it wasn't in person at the time, it definitely helped establish initial rapport with the person where I felt much more comfortable asking that question as opposed to just being this random username on Slack asking a question. I feel like, oh, I've talked to Mckenzie before. I don't feel as uncomfortable asking this question. So I don't know if that applies to you or people out there listening, but I did want to mention that definitely helped me as well for those in a remote role. And beyond that, I don't know, I'm coming up on I think I'm 37 now, and I've gotten comfortable finally after all my many years in admitting what I don't know and trying to be genuinely humble. But I love that yet caveat that you add to the end of your sentences. And I feel like I've never put it that way, but I feel the same way. Like there's definitely things I don't know yet, but there's nothing that I am afraid that I can't figure out, I guess, either through Google, ChatGPT, Bing, whatever derivative there is, and also asking questions. So I feel like I'm kind of waffling back and forth, but that's my unstructured, genuine thoughts as to the question you asked. Does that come close to answering?
Yeah, oh, 100%. What really stuck with me was you saying you've got to be comfortable admitting that you don't know. And it's like, you know what? Yeah, if you can just be honest with yourself and really let that sink in, I don't know this. I feel like there's going to be more of a drive there to ask a question and answer. It's like, yeah, of course you don't know it, but when you sit there and admit to yourself, I don't know this, there's a gap, no one's going to fill this in but me.
Yeah.
So
And
I just need to take care of
I've
it. Yeah.
also found, Mckenzie, that when I lead with like a caveat where I don't know or something like that, I feel like the response is almost always better, even though I can't really A/B test it, if I lead with that, because I feel like so many people don't. I know a lot of people are pretending, and I know a lot of people feel like they have to pretend until they can figure things out. And I feel like when people buck the trend and lead with, hey, I don't know, but I think X, Y, or Z, I feel like, I don't know, it helps them empathize with you. And they're like, wow, this person is willing to admit that they don't know. And I just feel like I've had much more productive conversations and situations that I think back to where I've led with that. And it's not to say that I'm perfect with that, but I've definitely noticed that. And I definitely wanted to mention that.
Yeah, that's such a great point. It probably does catch people off guard when you're like, yeah, I don't know. I feel like as a developer, there's this expectation, well, you just know everything,
Yeah.
right?
Right. Yeah. No, that's not how it
No,
works. Not at all.
not at all.
Yeah. Random questions now, just on the developer role. Are you using generative AI, ChatGPT, anything like that in your day-to-day work to unlock anything you don't know?
I have only used ChatGPT like once or twice when I got
Okay.
super, super stuck on something. And I think it is a great tool. I think it can really help people get unstuck. The only reason I don't use it more is because I still want to go through the process of learning things the hard way because it's going to stick in my brain more. I want to make sure I really understand what's going on. And I know you can still do that if you're using chat, if you take the time to, look at the code that's provided or the questions or whatever. But it would be really easy to just be like, oh, I'll research this later. I've got the
Yep.
answer I need.
Yep.
So I'm just trying to be proactive with myself. And
Yeah.
even if it takes longer right now,
Yeah.
I don't feel like I've earned it yet.
Yeah, no, fair. And that's an interesting perspective that I definitely respect and appreciate. And to your point, I feel like, I guess the developers or the generation that came before us, I guess they had Stack Overflow and Google to an extent where you've seen all the memes where they're like, yeah, just copy paste, put it in, it works, on to the next thing. And I do think, especially when you have like all of these tasks in your backlog that you're supposed to accomplish. It's interesting trying to balance that learning time, which reminds me, that's the next question I want to ask you about how you allocate learning time. But before I go there, like, yeah, it's so easy to say, to earmark it and be like, okay, I'm going to go back and I'm going to learn this later, but right now I'm just going to copy paste. And yeah, I do catch myself doing that we have an internal version of ChatGPT for like LinkedIn data. And it's interesting. I like it because you can basically have a pseudo conversation with it. You can say like, given X, Y, and Z in this class here, this is what I'm trying to do to like try to explain the business logic. And like, what is your recommendation or something like that? And it can be hit or miss, but it is unlocked a lot for me. And I don't know if that's good or bad, because to your point, maybe I should have struggled through that long term, but it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, I think we're all still trying to figure out, that balance. It's new
Yeah.
territory.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Learning time. So in the apprenticeship that I'm in, we are supposed to 20% of the time. So 8 hours a week, one day out of the week, that I'm supposed to be learning stuff unrelated. Well, it is related to my work, but like not work stuff. It's just like go learn something related to your job. I'm curious at at Winsupply, or do they encourage you to allocate time for learning?
They do, yeah. There's not a set program or anything, but they do encourage it. But it's really up to you. Like I said, there's no program or incentive for it. But I am very driven by learning. It's like one of my top Clifton strengths. So I set aside some time, usually at least an hour a day to study. Sometimes it's related to work, and sometimes it's something super random like oceans and dolphins. Like, I'm not gonna lie, but a lot of times I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm gonna go through my head first SQL book or my head first Java book and just, maybe learn some new techniques that I didn't know before. I think it is important to spend time learning about work outside of work.
Yeah.
Some people may not agree with that. They're like, work is work,
Yeah.
home is home. I'm
Yeah.
not going to mix the two. And, everyone has to do what works for them. For me, it's really hard to separate myself. I don't know. It's just how I am. And I love my job. I think if you don't like your job, then it could be easier to do that. But when I'm
Yeah.
passionate about it, I want to come home and code. I want to come home and learn
Yeah.
more. So, yeah, I think it is important for sure.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. And it is interesting. And I think, who am I to say either way? I think it's okay for people to treat it as work and just come home and to be. I think that's cool if that's what you want to do. And maybe that's what you want to do at a certain period of your life. And then maybe you just get inspired by something and maybe that changes. And I think it's okay and important to zoom out and to appreciate where we're at. I'm bad at that. I am horrible at that. I'm always thinking in the future, like a year from now or 5 years from now to an extent, and planning the next thing. I am terrible at trying to be present, as my lovely wife will remind me. I'm working on that. But yeah, I just wanted to highlight that it's so important to at least be aware, and to the extent you can, to appreciate where you're at in the journey.
Yeah, that's so true. That's a great reminder for me because, like you, I do struggle with being present. I'm always living in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Talk about LinkedIn. You reached out to me on LinkedIn. I'm so glad that you did, because you have an absolutely amazing story. When did you find LinkedIn? How do you use it?
I found LinkedIn, well, I've heard about before, but I signed up for LinkedIn because it was one of Tech Elevator's pathway program requirements. I didn't have it before. I really not on any social media other than this, and I've just because I would waste too much time on it. But I've kept LinkedIn because I found to be such a valuable tool, professionally. I've able to connect with a lot of really cool people. I've learned so much from it. Um, that's how I found it. I'm sorry. What did you have a second question with that? If you did, I
Well, I
forget.
did. I didn't ask it yet, but I'll ask it
Oh,
now.
sorry.
I'm curious. Do you primarily do you like scroll and just maybe engage if something resonates with you? Do you post at all?
I don't post much. I catch myself drafting up a post and then I'm like, I don't know enough about this. Let's not. So I
Fair.
don't post a lot, but I do scroll and see what other people are up to. I pretty much just follow anything related to work just to keep it,
Yeah.
kind of focused. So lots of just different software or
Yeah.
specifically Java groups.
Yeah. No, that's very cool. Switch gears slightly. The current job market that we're in right now is tough, and I definitely feel like I lucked out because I got into an apprenticeship program before it turned tough. And it sounds like you've been fortunate to, I guess, segue into a programmer role at a company you were already at. I'm still curious what advice you might have for people out there still trying to break down that initial door based on maybe your conversations with the alumni at Tech Elevator or otherwise.
Yeah, I definitely think that my situation was a little bit unique and I got kind of lucky. But my advice to others would be don't be afraid to look within the company you're currently at as long as you don't hate working there. I feel like a lot of people think, oh, I want to get into software, I have to go work for a tech company. I work for a plumbing company. You know, most everyone needs developers in this day and age, so make sure you have a broad view
Yeah.
of all of the companies that might be hiring. And the other advice I would give is to network, 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 and going back to what I said earlier about, just how I personally believe in excellence, always be presenting yourself the way you would want your potential employer to see you because you never know whose path you're crossing. I had no idea that my writing lesson or my student's dad was a director that was going to hire me someday. No idea. You never know who you're networking with. You're networking even when you don't know you're networking.
Yeah.
So just that's my advice.
I love that. But Mckenzie, I don't know how to network. How do I get started? I have no idea. What would you say?
So I would say there are a ton of groups, at least in my area, I guess it could be different across the country, ton of meetups like for coding that you can go to. So get on, I think it's Meetups or Meetup. It's a website like that.
Yeah,
And just start
meetup.
searching for things near you. And don't be afraid to go and meet people in person. I know it's really easy to do, like it's what we're doing right now. We're meeting online. But there is, I think, this is just me, something about meeting people in person, especially when you're networking. So get out of the house and talk to people, ask them about themselves. Don't make it about you.
Yeah.
People like to talk about themselves. So ask them questions, give them an opportunity to do it, and you'll find people that you can connect with them through LinkedIn, follow up with them, and you can even network at work. Go and talk to different people. Like, I don't know what everyone's work situation is like, but go to talk to people from different departments. Like if you work at a big company, you have so many people right there at your disposal, and you guys have something in common because you work for the same company. That's what I did. I would just go and be like, hey, what do you do here? What do
Yeah.
you do here? Can you tell me more about that? And that
Yeah.
makes you more valuable at there because you have more company knowledge. And I don't know, I think that served me well. That was some of the advice I was given by my director was talk to people here that you normally wouldn't talk to.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the encouragement to look at your current company and don't assume that you have to go join a tech company specifically. And maybe I didn't do that enough at my last job. Again, I wouldn't change anything going back in time, but I don't know that I considered that as hard as I might have. And especially in this job market, if you have a job, it's definitely worth having that conversation. And if you're afraid to have that conversation, go back and listen to Mckenzie's overall approach as to crafting that such that you don't have to necessarily be afraid that, they think that you're not happy or something like that in your current role. Yeah. Well, before I throw you on the hot seat for some rapid fire questions, was there anything else that you wanted to talk about today that we didn't?
I think you covered it. This has been a good conversation.
Yeah, no, I've enjoyed it thoroughly. Are you ready for the hot seat questions?
Let's do it.
All right, first question. What does your typical morning routine look like?
I hit snooze 3 times and then hurry up, put on my clothes I laid out the night before, and make myself a smoothie and head to work.
Okay, cool. And this was a remote role, I think you said?
This is hybrid, so I'm actually in the
Hybrid,
office
okay.
4 days and then work from home once.
Gotcha. How far is the office? I should have asked all this during the main interview. I'm failing the hot seat format, but I am curious.
It's about 30, 40 minutes with traffic, so
Okay.
it's a trek.
Yeah. All right, next question. If money didn't exist, what do you think you would do every day with your time?
I would definitely have a dolphin, and I would ride horses at a really fancy jumper barn all day long.
A dolphin and horses. Would they be in the same location or
Yeah, they'd be on the same property.
out of
I'd
convenience?
have like an aquarium on one side and then a barn on the other.
Love it. If you could send a single message to your former self to help you during this transition, what do you think that message would be?
I would tell myself that everything is worth it. Like, I know it's hard. I know you want to go to sleep. I know you just want to cry from how late you've been up and all the stuff you're shoving in your brain, but, you know, just keep mustering up the strength because it does pay off.
Yeah, I love it. What are your thoughts on Bitcoin?
I really don't know enough about it to speak even halfway intelligently, so I have no thoughts on Bitcoin.
Fair enough. Are there any books or podcasts that have had a big impact on you looking back?
Books, the Head First series are wonderful. They are really designed to help you teach or help you learn. So like for Java, SQL, Python, those have been great.
I don't think I've heard of those actually. That's on my, I took a note to that effect. I'm going to check those out. So yeah, where can people go to, I guess, learn more about you and support you on your journey or follow you on your journey?
Yeah, you can feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. That's really the only place you could find me, probably.
Okay, cool. Well, Mckenzie, this has been phenomenal. I will put your LinkedIn in the show notes, and I just want to thank you so much for reaching out on LinkedIn and being willing to come onto the show and share your phenomenal story. I have no doubt you're going to do amazing things. You already have, and I'm really glad that you came on and shared it with the audience.
Oh, no, thank you so much for having me, and I appreciate all the work that you're doing, and thank you so much for having me on.
Thanks for listening. If you got value from today's show, please consider leaving a 5-star rating and a review on Apple or Spotify. It's a free way you can support the show and help other people just like you find the story and others like it. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to follow the show on whatever podcast application you use. And most importantly, if you know someone that might be interested in breaking into tech, tell them about the show.